We are now getting a real look at the inside and outside of the alleged nightmare property where Jeffrey Epstein is accused of abusing and trafficking females. His notorious Zorro Ranch in New Mexico, currently under state investigation, by the way, with allegations of sexual abuse and now even homicide. We have these photos that have now surfaced, which give you a better sense of what this property looked like and how it may match up to the allegations. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, real quick, before we go any further, I gotta tell you about today's sponsor, Proof Wallets, okay? I've heard that these are like the best wallets you'll ever have. I understand why the hype is real. Proof Wallets, first of all, I love this, is a veteran-owned company built by craftsmen who take pride in what they make. And it shows, look how well they're designed. Also, super secure. Not only are they RFID blocking, but they also hold up to 25 cards without feeling, bulky or like anything's gonna fall out. The craftsmanship, that's obvious, but what really separates Proof is how they treat their customers. Did your wallet get damaged? Did it get stolen? They're gonna replace it for free. And you can even customize it with images, text, logos, anything you want. So go to go.carryproof.com/sidebar, order yours today, use code SIDEBAR for 20% off your entire order today. That is code SIDEBAR for 20% off. With all of this talk about the Zorro Ranch now, we are getting a sense of what this place actually looks like. How does this compare to the allegations? Does the layout of this property tell us something? Now, the reason I'm talking about this is because we have photos of the Zorro Ranch and its layout. KOAT News out in Albuquerque did a whole piece on this. We also got our hands on this Zorro Ranch insurance report that gives us more details and more photos. And again, I want to go over this property in detail. But first, context. Why does it matter? Well, if you've been following our reporting, there is a sinister spotlight on this former property of Jeffrey Epstein's. The New Mexico Department of Justice has launched an investigation into the Zorro Ranch, and it was reported that investigators even began a search of it. Now, this is parallel to another investigation that is being done by state lawmakers. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But you see, not only have there been allegations of sexual abuse at this property, but there was a chilling accusation in the newly released Epstein Files about homicides, about bodies being buried in the hills outside the property. And when you talk photos, even before I get into these shots of the property, look at these from the files, okay? Look at how young these females are seemingly on the property. I say females because I don't know the exact age. And I'm gonna get more into the accusations in a minute, but look, you have another shot of a young female. Take a closer look at the photos of this 7,600-acre property located 30 miles south of Santa Fe, nestled in this isolated area on the outskirts of Stanley, New Mexico. That seclusion is key here. I'll talk about that more too. But look, you have this picture of the rear view of the house with pillars. This one of the side room. This great room. Look how gaudy this is. Look how expansive this is. The office. I always talk a lot about Jeffrey Epstein's offices. Here you have a shot of a female in the office. I mean, you really get a sense of how grand this space is. Look at the interior shots. Swimming pool, garage. You have the accompanying ranch barns. It's so expansive. All these units. A bunkhouse. The firehouse, complete with a fire truck and a water tanker. Pretty unbelievable, to say the least. There's a lodge, too. A log cabin, a pole barn, which appears to have large trucks, tractors, construction equipment stored in it. It was reported that visitors thought this place looked like an amusement park. Epstein's accuser, Annie Farmer, said she was, quote, really glad that there is this renewed attention on Zorro, telling the paper out in the UK, when I was there, the thing that struck me was that it was like a world unto itself. Renowned accuser, the late Virginia Giuffre, in her memoir, said the Zorro Ranch was like Disneyland, with, quote, manicured grounds and gurgling fountains, a tennis court and a grass airstrip and hangar, the main house being what she dubbed Epstein's castle. And it was reported that Epstein had hosted, a lot of people there, hosted celebrities at this property, like reportedly director Woody Allen, social critic Noam Chomsky, that Epstein would visit this property multiple times a year. KOAT reports that former Prince Andrew had visited the Zorro Ranch too, but we just couldn't independently verify that. But this is interesting when you look at the ranch manager home and office. Take a look at this, because we've talked about the ranch manager. There are a number of emails concerning the ranch manager in the files, upkeep of the property and all that. But look at this. Gotta call this out. So apparently the FBI interviewed the Epstein ranch manager. Take a look. Redacted and his wife, Redacted, have been managing the Zorro Ranch for Jeffrey for approximately 4 years. There are 5 to 6 full-time staff at the ranch, as well as some seasonal employees. Epstein spends approximately 50 days a year at the ranch during his downtime, mostly in the summer. In the summer, Epstein generally spends 2 to 3 weeks at a time at the ranch and is shuttled around by helicopter. The last time Epstein was at the ranch was Thanksgiving 2006. Remember, this is an interview from back in the day. Epstein normally flies into either Albuquerque or Santa Fe and is driven to the ranch. Very little notice is given before Epstein flies to the ranch, usually 24 to 48 hours. Epstein usually brings his personal assistant, redacted, his bodyguard, friends, personal trainer, and sometimes his masseuses. The masseuses are not normally flown to the ranch, but are hired by Redacted and Redacted. Redacted keeps the financial records and usually arranges the massages. The names of the masseuses are obtained from 10,000 Waves Day Spa or by referrals. Redacted said that the masseuses are all checked out and that they are professionals who are licensed massage therapists. There have been approximately 5 different therapists used in the past. Redacted said Redacted could provide the names of the therapists and the amounts paid to them, but that we needed to go to the office to meet with her. Upon arriving at the office and greeting Redacted, Redacted received a phone call from the, quote, main office that told him they were no longer allowed to speak with us. The interview was immediately ended. By the way, whenever you talk about massages, there was always the main narrative that Epstein used massages as a way to begin the sexual abuse of young women and girls. But again, there's more photos, there's stables, things like that. I have to share some exciting news right now. We have officially launched our own streaming app, Law&Crime Plus. Check it out.
Get on the ground right now!
This is Law&Crime Plus. Ad-free, on-demand access to our hit series and exclusive access to our case files, 911 calls.
This is Kelly's mother. My wife and child got badly.
And the evidence they don't show you on TV. Join the community and track breaking stories. Stream now on Crime Plus.
Yeah, needless to say, we have a lot of cool things planned, and trust me, you will not want to miss it. Visit lawandcrimeplus.com today to grab our limited time offer of just $3.99 a month or $40.99 for the year. Okay, back to the story. Now, I was talking about this with my producer, Savannah, and she made a good point. Look how isolated this property is, right? Assuming all these allegations are true, and I'm going to talk about them more, that is a creepy detail. Look how spread out all these areas and all these buildings are, so isolated. All of that land. There's a line in the report that kind of shows that. The insurance report says the replacement cost of your home takes into account the following factors: the added difficulty of getting materials to your property. Again, because it's not near anything, it's alone. And actually, to show you some photos of how big and expansive this property is, look at this background of this photo of Epstein in the desert, or this photo of the opening to the ranch. I think this one does a really good job of seeing it. You have this aerial shot. Pretty incredible. Now, why does that expansive nature of the property matter? Well, there was an email from November 2019 and appears to be directed to an Edward Aragon. According to KOB4, he's a local radio host. The other names are redacted, but it says, Edward, this is sensitive, so it'll be the first and last email depending on your discretion. You can choose to take it or trash it, but this comes from a person that has been there and seen it all as a former staff at the Zorro. The material below was taken from Jeffrey Epstein's home as my insurance in case of future litigation against Epstein. Sorry, no questions. What is damning about Jeffrey Epstein is yet to be written. Did you know somewhere in the hills outside the Zorro, 2 foreign girls were buried on orders of Jeffrey and Madam G, seemingly meaning Ghislaine Maxwell? Both died by strangulation during rough fetish sex. And there appear to be links to purported sex videos in this email, including one that says, sex video with minor. Quote, please arrange for 1 Bitcoin by 6 p.m. EDT today, Thursday, 11/22/19, to the BTC wallet address, redacted. The USB will be sent anonymously to your attention by overnight courier upon receipt of the funds. You have my assurance this is exclusive, never shared before. No attorneys, no samples, no questions. Please confirm ASAP. Now, Aragon said he got this message anonymously. He sent the email to the FBI, which is why it was in the Epstein files that were released from the DOJ. He indicated he didn't end up paying this person, which when you think of 1 Bitcoin was reportedly worth $8,000 at the time, indicated that while he spoke to an FBI agent, apparently never heard anything back about what happened or the status of the investigation. And to be clear, we couldn't find more corroborating evidence of a homicide. We don't know if these allegations are true, or if true, when this would have happened. But apparently, again, this claim is being taken seriously. There's a renewed investigation. There's a search of this property. And when you look at this property in general and the way it looks in these photos, it is very much how it's described by the accusers. So based on the schematics that were obtained by KOAT, you have a ground floor that had areas like a gallery, a courtyard, a dining room, a mudroom, a garage, library, upper library, office, breakfast room. We're talking 18,000 square feet. Second floor, bedrooms, bathrooms, terrace, open courtyard. The basement had an exercise room, a massage room, jacuzzi, laundry, mechanical rooms, a lot of places, a lot of things to do. Now, a little history lesson here. So Epstein bought this property in 1993 from the family of the then New Mexico Governor Bruce King, purchased the leases from the state, or assumed the leases from the state, to get the wider surrounding area and essentially get more privacy. You know, apparently the closest neighbors were miles away. The nearest city was Santa Fe, 30 miles north. And apparently Epstein, when he assumed these leases that were originally for grazing purposes, by all accounts, he never used this property for agricultural purposes. Epstein told the Albuquerque Tribune in 1995, "I think New Mexico is the prettiest, most spectacular state by a long shot. It's just a normal home." Actually, in the Epstein Files, when Epstein sat down for that interview with Steve Bannon, remember this was part of potentially producing a documentary or film that would have rehabilitated Epstein's image, he talks at one point about the property, why he decided to get it in New Mexico.
So why did I buy a ranch in New Mexico in 1993? So that gives you some sense. So I would have funded it in 1990. Los Alamos, which was the high energy lab up in New Mexico, was losing all its scientists.
In Los Alamos, it was where Oppenheimer and where a lot of the nuclear weapons program, the bomb.
That's where the Manhattan Project.
Manhattan Project was at Los Alamos, and you bought your property out in New Mexico to be near that?
Yes, because the scientists were going to be, they cut the funding for high energy physics. But the people who worked in Los Alamos would still be in the Santa Fe area. I wanted to see if we could build tools so others smarter than me could help investigate it.
And that was the beginning of your concept of the Santa Fe Institute?
Yes.
And Santa Fe Institute was founded to do study in this type of...
Can these areas of strange things be described by some form of mathematics?
By the way, it's maybe not the easiest place to upkeep, because you look at this email from back in 2012 by a redacted, seemingly former employee. It says, quote, "Mr. Epstein, I do hereby resign my position here at Zorro Ranch effective today. I can no longer do the job for you here. I have worked and done my best all these years, and I'm tired, sick of, frustrated, and exhausted from trying to take care of this ranch with such obstacles. The treatment I have received has been unjust, unfair, and downright disconcerting to me. I will no longer take it, as there are other people that feel my job for you is not worthy and replaceable and treat me with disrespect. It has been said that it is easier to replace and start over so they can have their wish and rule your ranch without me. I would appreciate it if you paid me the rest of my vacation that I have not taken. It is attached. I will leave the company vehicle and keys here on ranch and can be reached by email. Thank you." No idea what that was about, but that's something. So the question now is, what allegedly happened there? Aside from those allegations of, bodies being buried, what happened there? Well, as you're seeing from these pictures, there were females on this property. And it was alleged that Epstein would fly in females to the ranch to hang out and allegedly be sexually assaulted on this secluded property. That he would entice these people with either money or jobs or connections or just a fun vacation. Listen to this account from what I believe was testimony in connection with Epstein's federal sex trafficking charges, that case out in New York City. Quote, "In 2004, when I was 15 years old, I flew on Jeffrey Epstein's plane to Zorro Ranch, where I was sexually molested by him for many hours. What I remember most vividly was him explaining to me how beneficial the experience was for me and how much he was helping me to grow. I remember feeling so small and powerless, especially after he positioned me by laying me on his floor so that I was confronted by all the framed photographs on his dresser of him smiling with wealthy celebrities and politicians. I first identified with this feeling the night after I was molested by Epstein, when another girl and I took out 2 of his ATVs and raced them across the mesa. I crashed mine and expressed my concern to the other girl of getting in trouble, which she replied to me, 'Don't worry, no one gets in trouble for anything here.'" Now, according to NBC News, at least 10 alleged victims claim that Epstein sexually groomed and abused them @Zorro. You listen to this account from an accuser at Ghislaine Maxwell's criminal trial. Remember, she was convicted of sex trafficking charges and was ultimately sentenced to 20 years in prison. Quote, approximately how old were you when you traveled to New Mexico? 15 or 16? Who went with you on that trip? Jeffrey and Ghislaine. Where did you spend most of your time on the trip to New Mexico with Maxwell and Epstein? At Epstein's house, which was a ranch. What do you remember about the ranch that you visited on that trip? I just remember that it was this giant ranch sort of in the middle of nowhere, and it seemed very empty on the interior, meaning there wasn't really any other people around. When you were at the ranch in New Mexico, where did you spend most of your time? In the guest bedroom that was assigned to me. And she was later asked, during that trip to New Mexico, was your bedroom in the same building as Epstein and Maxwell's bedrooms? Yes. So again, anytime I'm talking about the accounts, remember the photos I just showed you? You do wonder, is that on the second floor, like I mentioned when you look at the schematics? And then it goes on to say, quote, on that trip in New Mexico, was there ever a time when someone came into your room? Yes. Can you describe to the jury what you remember about that? I just remember someone at one point just came into the room and said, Jeffrey wants to see you, and then escorted me to see him. When that person came into your room and told you that he wanted to see you, how did you feel? I just, as usual, felt like my heart sank into my stomach, you know? And why was your heart sinking into your stomach? Because I did not want to go see him. What's the next thing you remember about that? I just remember being led to his bedroom and, you know, the same thing would happen. I mentioned Annie Farmer before, who testified at Maxwell's trial. She said she was taken to that ranch and said, quote, it was a large piece of property in New Mexico, so kind of a desert landscape, and there were different sections. And there was one that had like an old movie set, like a Western movie set on it. And there was a portion where we were staying where there's a small residence. Another experience after we were back at the residence was that it was decided that I would learn how to give Epstein a foot massage. Maxwell wanted to show me how to rub his feet, and so that was something I should learn how to do. And so she sat and held one of his feet and then instructed me to hold his other foot and showed me how to rub it. Where were you when this took place? In the same little area. There was I think it was kind of like a den type room, and yeah. Was this back at the ranch? Back at the ranch. So again, you look at the interior of the property, you look at the blueprints, and you think about where this could have been. Quote, what did Epstein do while you were rubbing his feet? He seemed, you know, to be enjoying it. He sort of made like groaning noises, like it felt good to him. How did you feel while you were rubbing his feet? I felt very uncomfortable. And she would go on to testify how Maxwell groped her, and Epstein at one point would jump into her bed and try to cuddle with her. You look at this from a court filing in the Epstein Files from accuser Virginia Giuffre. Quote, to illustrate my connection to these places, I include 4 photographs taken of me in New Mexico. The first one is a museum in Santa Fe, New Mexico. We had gone sightseeing for the day. Epstein took this picture of me. I was approximately 17 at the time, judging from the looks of it. At the end of the day, we returned to Epstein's Zorro Ranch. Second picture is me on one of Epstein's horses on the ranch in New Mexico. The following 2 are from wintertime in New Mexico. And there are accompanying photos that appear to match up to what we just showed you, accompanied by the following allegation. Quote, I also had sex with Dershowitz at Epstein's Zorro Ranch in New Mexico in the massage room off of the indoor pool area, which was still being painted. Now, Giuffre had claimed multiple times in court paperwork that she had been forced to have sex with Alan Dershowitz, the attorney at Epstein's various properties, but Dershowitz adamantly denied that, actually filed a lawsuit against Giuffre for defamation. They agreed to drop the case. Giuffre had said publicly that she might have been mistaken about whether it was actually Dershowitz. But Giuffre had also claimed at one point that she was sent to New Mexico to have sex with former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, and even though he admitted he visited the ranch, he denied those allegations. And also, we can't forget this, that in the Epstein Files, there was a disturbing New York Times article from back in 2019 called Jeffrey Epstein Hoped to Seed Human Race with His DNA, which alleged that Epstein told people he wanted to impregnate women and have them give birth to his babies on the Zorro Ranch. That was actually included in the Epstein Files release. It was part of the SDNY news clippings. And there was also this material how Epstein had this apparent interest with eugenics. Now here's the problem. The reporting indicates that there wasn't a full and proper investigation. Remember, Epstein took that sweetheart deal in Florida back in 2008 where he pled guilty to state sex crimes charges involving procuring a minor for prostitution, but he avoided more serious federal charges at the time. And in New Mexico, he was able to successfully fight having to register as a sex offender. This is according to KOAT. And New Mexico apparently didn't even establish a human trafficking law until 2008. No charges have been filed against anybody in connection with the Zorro Ranch. But after Epstein was arrested in 2019 on federal sex trafficking of minors charges in New York City, you had then New Mexico attorney Hector Balderas, who started an investigation into the Zorro Ranch. You had Land Commissioner Stephanie Garcia Richard, who canceled the ranch lease. Garcia Richard had said this land was no doubt used to protect the privacy of Epstein and his co-conspirators. But it would only be a few months after launching that investigation that Balderas was reportedly told by the United States Department of Justice to pause the probe. Balderas told NBC that he was looking into possible connections to different states, identified potential suspects, plural there, suspects, so not just Epstein and Maxwell, that there was apparently evidence of child sex trafficking, that it was being gathered, that there were records being found establishing an illegal enterprise. But the reason he was apparently told to stand down is because the New York prosecutors thought that this probe may interfere with what they were doing. And Balderas said that his office sent a letter to the feds in 2020 requesting that they seize the ranch, that they use the proceeds to pay out the victims, but claims he never got a response back. And Balderas told NBC, quote, "They essentially gutted our ability to aggressively seek justice for victims." Now, the ranch would eventually get sold to Texas businessman and politician Don Huffines in 2023. But now, after the files released from the Epstein Files Transparency Act, we now have two parallel investigations. So one is a truth commission that was set up by New Mexico state lawmakers, and another is an investigation by the New Mexico Department of Justice. So one's kind of a criminal investigation, one is whether or not there needs to be a change in the law. As I mentioned, the property was searched for the first time since, I believe, 2019. And by the way, while the Huffines family had plans to turn this property into a Christian retreat, they were ordered to stop construction at this site in January, and they have announced that they have been fully cooperating with the investigations, including allowing the search on that property. But by the way, at the time of this recording, it's not even clear if they found anything. It's also difficult to say what may be found or used to corroborate the accounts of accusers, considering so many years in the past, what is left there, what forensic material is left there. It's also switched hands. And by the way, in terms of the bodies, I did a whole episode on the difficulties of excavating human remains, what could be there, what evidence could be there. You can go check it out. But KSFR reported that this past weekend, you had State Representative Tara Lujan, who joined protesters who are demanding transparency about this investigation. They were all outside the Zorro Ranch. She said, "My heart is beating outside of me right now, but it's nothing compared to what our victims have gone through and what they continue to go through. We have to change the future. Silence has never served any of us, and it will never serve us." U.S. Representative Melanie Stansbury told the Around the Roundhouse, the New Mexican's political podcast, the allegations at the ranch are serious. "We know that girls were trafficked there for decades. He had an air landing strip on the property, and part of his pattern of abuse is that he had girls who traveled with him. They would kind of be companions to him and Ghislaine Maxwell on a regular basis, and so he brought many of those girls to New Mexico." So there you have it, just another aspect to this property. We'll keep a very careful eye on what happens next there. That's all we have for you right now on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can also check us out on NBC's Peacock if you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you next time, everybody.